Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I hope it's still afternoon. Yes. We are very happy to be here. We are also Eastern Cape boys, though we stay in different places. I was born in Queenstown, in Tembeka Ngcukaitobi. So we are Eastern Cape people. What we call home is Eastern Cape. I am not going to be talking too much today. I'm going to be probing, senior advocate. Don't blame me when I forget that, right? So now I'm name dropping because he's also my friend, so I don't call him senior advocate, senior counsel. So don't think I'm being nice. In any case, Tembeka's first book is The Land is Ours. It's an interesting book. I mention it because it's a kind of a natural progression to the land matters. I'll tell you what. This is about 6 first black lawyers in South Africa that actually were more on the foundation of South African Bill of Rights. I'm sure most of you did not know that. I did not know that before I read this book. So these lawyers are basically the foundation of what we call, according to me, the South African democratic state. And then now we have a new book which was published in 2018. No, 20.
Actually, let's just check.
Yeah. I'm not wearing my glasses, but it is his second book.
2021.
Yeah. And this, as in the title, it says it all. The title says Land Matters, South African Failed Land Reforms and the Road Ahead. And first of all, Tembeka, tell us, why do you think South African land reform has failed?
I think that the evidence is clear that the reforms have failed, if only you look at the outcomes. The clearest evidence is Mandela promised that in the first 5 years of his government, he would have transferred 30% of productive agricultural land to black hands. By the time he left, the figure was 0.9%. In 2021, when I published my book, I said that the figure was 9%. The smart people from Stellenbosch criticized me. They said I was downplaying the number because the figure was a lot more than that. In 2022, President Ramaphosa gave a speech in the ANC conference. He said the figure was 11%. So it turns out that I actually knew the numbers better than the Stellenbosch people. So just on that fact alone, 30 years later, we are at 11% of a promised 30% in the first 5 years. The second clear fact is what was reported by the Kgalema panel. It said that if we continue according to the current trajectory, right, it is going to take something like 700 years to finish all of the land claims that are pending and the land claims that were opened by Jacob Zuma in 2013. So that was an official parliamentary requirement. So the outcomes are clear that they don't match the objectives. That's not the point of the book, because I would have thought that the failure is evident. You can travel anywhere, you see that it's patently clear that productive land is in white hands and black people are living in marginalized spaces. In fact, today, in this conversation, every speaker who has spoken has confirmed that point. So we know it as a social fact, we also know it as a scientific fact, that land reform has failed. But the point of my book was to explain why. What is the problem? I ultimately came to 3 explanations. Explanation number 1 is that we have been trying to solve the wrong problem, if I can put it in simple terms. What the ANC wanted to do in 1992 to 1994, when it adopted the 2 critical instruments, the Ready to Govern and the RDP, it explicitly said it was trying to solve the problem of land injustice. What that means is simply the fact that black people have no land, but they need it for survival. So they said that's the problem we're trying to solve. And they said they were going to solve this problem through the redistribution of land. Right? And it's a very simple process. The conception has only two elements. The first question is, do you need land, and can you afford to pay for it? If the answer to that is yes, you then get the land. The next question then is, what are you going to do about the land, which is the productivity part of it? If those two match, you get a piece of ground. But what the ANC ended up doing, which is why I'm saying that we're solving the wrong problem, is to pursue land restitution at the expense of land redistribution. If you look at the RDP document and the Red to Govern, nobody thought that land reform would be pursued by asking a historical question as to whether or not you were dispossessed of land from the 19th of June, 1913. Everybody knew that if you focused your resources on that question, you're going to solve only 9% of the land problem. Because by 1913, South Africa was already a white country. It had been made a white country in 1910. And it had been made a white country in the wars of dispossession. So you could never focus on driving land reform through land restitution. But the ANC twisted the requirement. So that was the first fundamental problem. It's a conceptual problem. They got it wrong from the onset. After they got it wrong from the onset, the methods that they used were just wrong. They allowed the private sector to dictate the terms of the game. So we have a willing seller, willing buyer. It's policy. It's in the 1997 white paper. There is no country emerging from colonial rule as deep and as structural as South Africa that can rely on the market to resolve its problems.
And as a result, in your book, if I get it right, you say that as a result, the land reform of South Africa has not only failed, but it has benefited the people that were like the white owners. Do you want me to give you time to quote a little bit of the start of why you say that?
No, I can talk about that.
Yes.
I mean, again, the evidence is clear that land reform has benefited land beneficiaries of colonialism and apartheid at the expense of the target group of land reform. I'll give you one specific figure. In 2018, I was at the University of Pretoria at their Gates Business School in a debate with the then minister, the one who said that she had a hole in her head. I asked her a simple question: how much money has your government paid since 1994 for land reform? The answer then was 60 billion rands. I asked the next question: of that, how much has gone to black people? She said, well, I'm sorry, the majority has gone to white people. I said, how much? Of that 60, 40 billion had gone to white people. I said, how did this happen? I then researched the point. What I did discover was that most of the money had been used to pay resettlement claims to white landowners. But the white landowners remained in charge of the land, either as tenants, or as consultants, or as farm managers, or as controlling the value chain. So the problem there that I came up with in the book is that once you have a structure in which land reform is embedded in the economic structure, it is clear that the outcomes are always going to benefit the people that are controlling the economy. And that is why I came to the conclusion that if you are going to say, I want to do land reform, and you allow the policy to be dictated by the people that own the land, you are always going to have the outcomes that we currently have. So, what has happened then to the 20 billion? Most of it has gone to waste because 80% of all farms that have been restituted are land farming, and that they are having to be reworked by the same people who've been paid the 40 billion. Some of it has gone to corruption. And again, don't need to go further on this. Take the Mala instance. It's a case I know well because I worked on it on behalf of some of the communities there. The valuation of the farm is at most 700 million, even though that was already an exaggeration. Another valuation is 300 million, the third one is 500 million. What does the government pay? 1.2 billion rands. So I asked the officials what happened to the extra fat of 400 million. Nobody knows what happened to it. So the money that should have gone into land reform has largely gone to people's pockets and it has gone to waste. But the key that I try to emphasize is that if you want to do land reform, you've got to focus on the structure of it. The structure is wrong. It's designed in a way that benefits the already privileged.
Moving on, I want us to talk about the land reform bill, and before we close this chapter, that was in Parliament. By the way, I was amused when I was reading the stems of different political parties in Parliament. It's as if everybody from your book treated it as a supermarket. Everybody took only what they liked, and then it's like, okay, this I don't like. Like, for instance, the EFF, advocate is saying that you can expropriate land without compensation. We're taking that, but we don't care about the property laws. But the J says, the advocate says, but you must respect the property laws. So it means that you must not confiscate land without paying for it. So it was an amusing thing to see for me, and I was wondering when I was watching the Parliament, but if it is that amusing to you. And where is the land reform bill now in Parliament? Where is the process? I know, but initially it was being used for political expedience, I suspect.
Yeah, look, they have passed many bills and they've dropped many bills. The most contentious bill was the expropriation bill. I was involved in the drafting of the 2008 bill, which was dropped like a hot potato when farmers and banks objected to a very moderate clause that we had proposed. I was in the drafting committee, a moderate clause on expropriation, right, which didn't talk about expropriation without compensation, but spoke about expropriation subject to just and equitable compensation. But widespread clamor in this country, they objected to it. 10 years later, as luck would have it, the debate returned again. But now, with a radical clause, what has now happened is that everybody has gone back to our 2008 version as actually the vision behind the Constitution, which has now made its way into the current expropriation bill, which has been signed. I think it's waiting now for the final passage in Parliament to be signed by the President. So that's a promising start, but not enough to solve the problem of 350 years of continuous dispossession, which is still continuing in the last 30 years of freedom. Then you have another bill, which is the land redistribution bill. Now, this is a bill the ANC should have passed on day one after it became the government. But it wasted everyone's time. Because the model of that bill is in fact in section 25 of the Constitution, which is one of the most radical sections in the world. And no one actually knows this, that this section was fought hard by Sheila Kamara, who opposed it. And the ANC won the section. And as soon as it won it, it abandoned it. This land redistribution bill has got two primary goals. The first goal is to ask who needs land and cannot afford it. And the second goal is to ask where can the government acquire the land cheaply so that it can redistribute it. That bill was spoken about at the ANC conference in 2022 and it was passed. But I understand that the ANC again has done nothing about it, which means that both the expropriation bill and the land redistribution bill were just political gimmicks.
Recently, I watched a UN debate, and of course, after they talked about Russia and Ukraine war, and there was the president of Ghana was asking the Western nations, the Western countries, that they have a duty to pay reparations for historical injustice to African countries, and it was slightly ignored, of course. But you talk about reparations on your book. Can you tell us in the South African context what you mean about that, how it would go?
Well, African people deserve reparations in this country. You know, this idea that Africans somehow, unlike other nations, will just lift themselves by the straps of their boots without affirmative action, without black economic empowerment, without any support, is an utterly unrealistic idea. Reparations were part of the debate during the transition. Why? Because the structure of the South African economy is built on black exploitation. You know, AfriForum denies this all the time. But AfriForum is always distorting the history of this country, including distorting dispossession itself. According to AfriForum, dispossession didn't even happen. The black people arrived here way after the whites arrived. And some people, enlightened whites, believe the nonsense. So we have to do spiritual and psychological reparations by correcting the record of the suffering of Africans. But that is not enough. You cannot do only spiritual and psychological reparations to the harm that has been caused by colonialism and apartheid to Africans. You have to do material reparations, economic reparations. And this was part of the TRC debate, by the way. The TRC recommended material reparations, but to a very small pool. The ANC, typical of its mealy-mouthed approach to anything restorative, has never implemented reparations. That is why last year there was a protest outside the Constitutional Court by all of the victims that were identified in the trials who still have not been paid today. But we also need structural reparations. Right? When I looked at the German Nazi situation, I looked at the entire reparations program. People don't know this, that the victims of the Holocaust are still receiving reparations as late. The last reparations were paid in 2018, since 1945. The reparations are still being paid now. Now, when you look at this, the African problem in South Africa since 1652 of repeated pillage, repeated plunder, repeated slavery, repeated dispossession. And then you say to these people, well, look after yourselves, we'll keep the economy. And to exclude the economic question in the transition. So it's clear that the South African situation cries out for reparations. The debate is a different debate as far as I'm concerned. What is the form of reparations and who should pay? So I'm happy to have that conversation. But there can be no sensible conversation that Africans don't deserve reparations.
Yeah, I seem to remember that on your book you say it should be institutionalized, the reparation, instead of paying people money that will end up on the politicians' pockets. But lastly, I hear sometimes you being attacked by the left wing as because in my thinking, and this is just a label, you're a constitutionalist because of course you practice law. And then I hear you being attacked on the right side for being too radical. So how do you position yourself?
No, I do get attacked by Africanists and racists at the same time. So I never understand how racists and Africanists are attacking my position. But let me explain, maybe this is the forum to explain this. And that's why this is a good thing, it's authors. I'm fundamentally a constitutionalist. And so I'm unwavering on my belief. It's almost a religion in constitutionalism. But I want to ask a different question about constitutionalism. What version of constitutionalism? I am in favor of a transformative constitution. A constitution that breaks the patterns of the past. A constitution that breaks the consequences of apartheid and the consequences of colonialism. I'm not in favor of a constitution that sanitizes the past. I'm not in favor of a constitution that protects property for its own sake. I'm in favor of a constitution that is the platform in which we can drive the transformation strategy that is required by this country. A lot of people, when they talk about constitutionalism, abuse it to protect the privileges of the past. And this is the kind of perverse usage of constitutionalism that I'm opposed to. So this is why, when I speak of constitutionalism, the left and the right, in fact, do not seem to agree. But it's because of a version of constitutionalism that I am supporting. Now, my view is that my version of radical constitutionalism is precisely our constitution. Why? Section 25. I want to make 3 quick examples. I see you are saying now we've got 2 minutes.
Yeah.
Okay.
You can
2 minutes from now.
Yeah.
There are no constitutions in the world that prescribe the right of restitution. You know, this right of return. It is a radical thing. Our constitution doesn't protect property. This is despite the fact that white landowners demanded the protection of property. They never got it. Number 3, you have no right to be paid market value when your land or your property is taken under our constitution. The best you can get is just an equitable. Sometimes you can get 0. So we have probably the most radical constitution to break the patterns of the past. The problem is that we've got to dust it off the shelves and put it to use.
Since we still have a minute, why then do you think the ANC hasn't used this wonderful constitution to benefit the interests of the majority?
I think it's precisely because of its radical implications. Because once those are explicated, it really becomes clear, what the consequences would be. I'll give you one example. In 1996, the ANC wins a crucial victory because it gets Section 25 with no protections of property and with no protections of market value. A year later, in 1997, together with the World Bank, by the way, and I've written this in Land Matters, it was the World Bank that insisted on winning seller, winning buyer. It adopted policies that were driven by the World Bank. So the answer is there.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for indulging us.